My name is Elizabeth Schlegel. I'm responsible for faculty development and medical education research at the Zucker School of Medicine. And today we are talking about learning, and not how you teach, not about anything else, but really how do you drink from the fire hose, what we always say is happening at the medical school, and how do we just deal with this enormous, gigantic amount of knowledge that comes to us every day. So hence, it's not just for studying for a medical school, or for any college, for anything else. It is really lifelong learning what you have to do. And we really hope to help you out today. But I also brought you today our Director of Academic Success, Amber Chess, and I'm very happy to have her with me. Amber, why don't you introduce yourself?
Sure, thank you so much, Dr. Schlegel. So my name is Amber Chess, and I also work at the Zucker School of Medicine. I'm the director of their Academic Success Office. I'm also a medical education learning specialist, and basically my job entails helping students learn how to learn. So I do a lot of workshops with students, one-on-one consultations with students, and not just students who are struggling, but students really a lot of students who are doing very well and they just want to do a little bit better, and we just sort of check in, so sort of like academic counseling in a way. And then another large part of my job is helping students get ready for their board exams. So step 1 prep and things like that, helping students get organized with that and just being really efficient and effective in the ways that they're preparing for different sorts of learning activities at the school. I'm really happy to be here.
Thank you very much, Amber. And it's really a lot of methods that you're going to talk about are really evidence-based and research-based. But this is not a research talk. This is really how are you using all these methods that we're going to revisit with you guys today. So, but how does this session work? So we decided to include a polling function, and we use poll everywhere, what we always use at the medical school. Here it is. Here are the instructions to log in. So we would ask you to text SOM1 from just any smartphone to the chat 37607, and then once you join, you get a text message back from polling, and then you're on into the system. If this doesn't work, Amber and I really decided, well, we'll leave the chat function open simply to see what's going on, but we will also leave it as a backup if the polling shouldn't work, and also at the very end in order to answer questions that you guys might have.
Yes, and it should work anywhere. I see a question in the chat. Can you use it from other countries? It should work.
It should work from anywhere. About the polling function, I tried it with the Caribbean. That didn't work so fast, but it worked at one point as well. So we'll see. All right. Great to have you guys. Okay, so let's ask you the first question, shall we? And my question really is, if it loads, so to say, yeah, I would like to know my audience, when I study, this is what I do. And Emma, let's take a look what our audience is doing when they're studying. Oh, I like that. I try to teach myself. That's awesome. Yep. Handwritten notes. Oh, Anki, you're big in Anki. Super. All right, somebody else is joining. That's great. Wow, we have 107, 118. Guys, so this will handle the first 700 responses. I just have to tell you that. Other than that, you know, more than 700, it explodes. Just kidding, but okay. Flashcards, memorization.
These are all really great strategies. You guys are ahead of the ball here.
This is amazing, guys. You know it all, and this is really great because then we can already work with the knowledge that you guys bring to us. So this is really good. Oh, this is really good. All right. Log my errors. Okay. Oh, that's a good one. Amber, what do you think? Logging your errors.
Yeah, at our school, we actually use a error analysis form where we really encourage students to dig in and see what went wrong, whether it was content or maybe something.
Oh, wow. Else. So this person here has a whiteboard. I have a whiteboard, and it really helps. And I do a lot of things where people laughing at me, like schlepping my whiteboard from one place to the other, but I really do because it works. I also rewrite my notes, and some students rewrite and then retype them, and it really helps them. Practice problems, yeah. If you get to them, that is really awesome. Okay. Yeah, each other. It is.
We're getting a note that the poll is full, so.
All right, okay, that's good. Okay, guys, thank you so much. This is really awesome. So, well, you bring us a lot, and this is really great. I don't think I have to tell you that, because this is really where the rubber hits the road. Please grab pen and paper for key takeaways that really work for you. So it's really important. When we put this talk together, we were really thinking, well, there's a lot of knowledge out there. We don't talk to people who never studied in their life. No, you're obviously very successful. However, the things that usually limit us the most is what we believe about ourselves. And maybe that sounds to you like a kind of shallow pep talk. It's not, because what we believe about ourselves, this is really what we are. And this is really the boundaries that we set ourselves. And what I want to do today is really expand your boundaries and invite and challenge you to experiment with the methods that we tell you, to try to make mistakes, find awesome new fields, and expand your knowledge, how you can learn and become the best learner you can be. And this is not just a shallow talk. It's kind of, when you're in a medical school environment or any learning environment, we need you to be the best learner you can be, because we need you to be effective. There is so much knowledge out there. And the only way that we all can build this community better and learn, especially in times like this, is become the best learners that we can be. Sound good? All right. So let's go a little bit back to what usually the common knowledge about this is. When I would ask each and every one of you, you could tell me your personal learning preference. You could tell me, oh yeah, I'm a visual learner. I'm an auditory learner. I like to listen to things. I like to hear people speak. Some people really read and write a lot. That's me. I really have to take notes. And some people are really kinesthetic, and no wonder. This will then be the people who are just the great surgeons, or the awesome people who diagnose blind with their hands. So the learning preferences have been accompanying us all the time, and this is what we're talking about. However, I want to challenge you here a little bit. So in 1983, Howard Gardner, a Harvard University professor, published a landmark book, and he was proposing multiple intelligences. In fact, proposing 8 multiple additional intelligences. And this intelligence has literally expanded the mind of a lot of educators that said, whoa, 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 there's so much out there than just visual and listening and writing, kinesthetic. And actually educators started to build curricular and so forth and started to teach from this way. But I want to turn this around today for you guys. I want you to think about, if there are multiple intelligences out there, maybe there are some other competencies, aptitude, options to learn way better than just with the 4 learning preferences everybody tells us about. So let's take a look what these these intelligences actually are. So we have, besides the linguistic that we already know, we have spatial, visualizing the world in 3D. This would be an intelligence. Well, guess what? If you're a surgeon and you know your landmarks in the human body, you will definitely have this intelligence. Or if you're a scientist and you add science to whatever you do, you're a naturalist. Some people need to study and listen to music. Well, I don't. But if you have a really music aptitude and it helps you, you have a musical intelligence, and you probably play an instrument in addition to whatever you do in life. And there are other intelligences that really help us. And I'm proposing them to you because if we add these intelligences into what we're already doing, we expand our field of competencies, of addressing other people, of learning how we learn, of looking at things in a different way, and maybe acting in a different way. And in doing so, improving our learning. And let me challenge you with some weird ideas. So what type of intelligence resonates with you? And how do you prefer to learn? Let's think about this for a second. And why don't we start to do things a little different than we did it? Well, why not put a Postit note with an important concept on the bathroom mirror and use the space and use writing? And yeah, our left one is probably, yeah, that's funny, but no. If it works for you, that's what counts. Or why not pace in the morning in my room and read out loud what I need to remember? Try it. You might find awkward for a moment, it works. Another way that a lot of people do is, by the way, speaking in their dictaphone or in their cell phone while they are taking a stroll. And you know what? Everyone is doing this. Nobody would notice it. Just an idea. Or why not reserve the time from 5 a.m. to 6 a.m. in the morning to review for an hour every day? And I had a student who say, Dr. Schlegel, don't laugh at me. What I'm doing is I pull my reviews in the morning, they're under my bed, and then I review them. I get up, I go to class, and it's awesome. I just know really everything. So this is actually my introduction to what Amber and I are going to talk to you today. And now I'm giving you my learning objective because the actual content starts now. We want to reflect on new formats of education with you. We would like to think about different types of studies depending on intrapersonal, individual, versus team-directed, interpersonal learners. And we would like to identify personal effective learning strategies. All right, let's start. So, why do we do this? Let's take a step back and talk a little bit about the Zucker School of Medicine. We have a really innovative program here. We have an integrated program that trains students to learn together the basic sciences with the clinical sciences, which means to learn the basic sciences first and then immediately on the same day, if possible, apply them to some medical field, usually in an ambulance run or EMT or any type that's possible to them. We also have an environment where we work very interactive, either in collaborative large group sessions, you could say they are lectures with a lot of collaboration, or in small group sessions where people very intently talk with each other. We have a special learner environment that values independent study and self-directed learning. Also, we want our students to engage in reflective practice throughout the entire medical program, because if you think about what you just did, it sticks way better. And ideally, we're aiming to have a community of practice, so every starfish counts. Every person in our community counts, the ideas count, and the reflection counts. And one very important ingredient here is self-directed learning. And Emma will tell you what all this is about.
Right. So a big sort of buzzword in medical education these days is self-directed learning. It's very important skills to have as you enter med school, and also as you progress just through your medical career. You're really going to be expected to be a self-directed learner. And so these are 4 steps that you can think about as you're learning that will help you develop these skills. So the first step is to assess your readiness. So this is almost like you're coming up with a plan. So you can think about looking ahead, how much time do you have to do this learning? What might the important things be? You're sort of like thinking about your readiness to learn. In the next step, you're going to be setting your learning goals. And so this is where you might be looking at any learning objectives that may have been provided, thinking about really what it is that you want to get out of this learning session that you're about to take place in. Again, the timeline for the completion of activities. You can think, maybe you've heard of SMART goals. So using SMART goals to as you're setting your learning goals. So making sure, that they're measurable, that you have a time cutoff, that you can actually meet these goals, that they're not too lofty, something, that you're just going to fail at. Make sure that they're SMART goals. And then as you're engaging in the learning process, you're really using metacognitive strategies. So you're thinking about the process that you're participating in. So you're really sort of monitoring yourself along the way, figuring out what's working for you, what's not working for you. What works for you might not work for your friend, right? And so really it's a personal process that you need to be paying attention to for your own self. And what works in one setting might not work in another setting, right? So what works in maybe large group might not work in small group, or might not work in the clinical setting. And so really just paying attention to those little details. And then at the end, you're going to evaluate your learning. So this is what Dr. Schlegel was talking about with the reflection. So you're taking a little bit of time, and this is really important to do this. Sometimes people will skip this step, but to reflect on whether or not you were able to meet your goal, and why. So if you what worked, what didn't work, and how can you incorporate that into the next time you make your goals. So it's sort of like an ongoing cyclical process. Next slide. So here's the curriculum overview for our school. This is the first 2 years of medical school. We break up our curriculum. We call the first 2 years the first 100 weeks, and the second 2 years the second 100 weeks. And you can see we have several components of our curriculum here. The first is mechanisms of health, disease, and intervention. So every course has this component, and this is like the basic science components of the course. We also have structure, and this is where our students would learn about anatomy.
Apologies, I wanted to circle.
Histo, all the imaging, embryology, pathology, that all takes place in the structure component of our curriculum. And there's also labs obviously associated with that as well. And then we also have our PPS, or patient, physician, and society component. And this is really what some people call like the doctoring piece of our curriculum. It's really like how to interact with patients and society. And what's unique about our school is we really give students the option or the ability to jump right into this piece of the curriculum. And so from the very first course, our students enroll in an EMT program. So they're getting that experience right off the bat. And then as they move through, during every course, they have what we call ICE. And so these are initial clinical experiences. And so they're going to different physician offices, different clinical settings to participate in that learning as well. And so the students really, really enjoy it. Dr. Schlegel, did you have anything else to add about this?
Well, I think it is really clear that we need our students to be as effective learners as possible, because this is just a lot of information that they need to consolidate in a very short time. So superficial learning with a couple of reading doesn't really cut it. And another point is really, once you know what works for you, and Amber, you made a very important point when you say what works in one session doesn't work in the other, or what works in one learning environment doesn't work in the next. Whatever you found out that works best for your learning and your study habits, you gotta protect it, and you really gotta do this and execute it as good as you can. So we really need people who become doctors to be as effective learners as possible. And yes, it might be different from medical school to medical school, simply because the educational philosophies might be different, and that's fine. That's what makes it so colorful.
We have a question about how long are each of these blocks. You can see that the yellow piece down right there, that's the summer between first year and second year. And so those first 4 blocks take place during the first year, and then those last 3 take place during the second year. And then we have some protected time at the end of second year where our students are preparing for step 1. And then they participate in a transitions program, which will help them sort of get up to speed so that they're able to enter into year 3. And yes, we do have them retake EMT, even if they do already have an EMT license, because the way that the EMT course is taught at our school, it's a little bit more in depth, and it's for actual medical students. So students still have to take that.
Thank you. These are good questions.
Okay, so studying solo or studying in a group, surviving an interactive environment. So most of our students will do both of these things, and speaking from experience, the students who do make time to study in a group tend to do a little bit better than those who just study solo. So generally speaking, most students will study solo for the first part of the week to sort of synthesize and consolidate the information on their own before coming together as a group to study. Our curriculum has group work built into it, which is really nice. So our pearls, small groups where students are working on different cases, they're working as a group, and so naturally they get some of these group learning benefits. But we can just go through these really quickly. The interpersonal learning, you want to be comfortable spending time alone and thinking and reflecting and sort of working through that self-directed process that we talked about a couple minutes ago. Having a sense over control of your own time and planning. So you're in charge of your learning, and that's really important. You're also considering the big picture, and you might even consider keeping a personal journal of like a reflective journal of what's working and what's not working, so that you know what works for you. In the group setting, you might mentor or advise others, talk out concepts and learning problems in a group, You could play educational games. That's really fun. You could also teach each other, which is also a very effective strategy, not only to make sure that you've got the information, but also to uncover any gaps that you might have. So if, you know, a lot of times I see a student would watch a video or maybe read, you know, read a chapter or two, and they're like, oh yeah, I've got it. I have a good understanding of it. But do you really? I mean, you might be familiar with that content, but if you can't turn around and teach it to someone and explain it in your own words, you might not know it as well as you think you do. And so that's a really important piece that's missing. We spend a lot of time putting the information in, but we also want to practice getting it out. And we'll talk about that more in a second.
Okay, Amber, I just want to touch upon one question in the chat here where people said they're more introvert and they like more to study for themselves. So what is it keeping a good balance? And you wouldn't believe it, but I think I'm more an introvert than an extrovert. And I really enjoy solistic study time. Also, it's simply, if you're playing in an orchestra, you need the time for yourself to play your instrument and to practice your instrument. Otherwise, you will never be able to play in an orchestra. It's really the same idea. So I really want to encourage you that taking the time for yourself and absolutely protecting that time and making sure you know you are comfortable with the content on your own and you do the things that work for you prior to entering a group, it will help you way more better. Also, when you enter a group as an introvert, think about specific questions you want to ask and just really make good note of the time, and also let your group know. Let your group know, you know, I'm more an introvert studier. I like more to spend time on my own, but I really appreciate being here, and I just let you know I prepared some questions. So you can really help your group to navigate how you study in that group. I understand it's not a natural for a lot of people, and that's fine. Make a note of that, be who you are, and your group will actually help you to mitigate that out.
Good point. Yeah.
All right. Okay.
So now we're going to jump into 6 strategies for individual studies. So these 6 strategies, I can't see them. I'm sorry, Dr. Schlegel, I can't see the bottom of your slide.
So it's dual, it's elaboration, space practice, interleaving, retrieval practice, concrete examples, and dual coding.
Okay. Right. So these are actually the big 6 strategies. And I talk a lot about these strategies when I meet with students individually, and also when I do workshops with students as they're preparing for their board exams. And so we're just going to go through each of these and just tell you some practical tips to take away. So the first one is elaboration. And so elaboration really means just sort of elaborating on whatever it is that you're focused on. So sort of zooming out a little bit and seeing the big picture. So some ways to think about this are, if you've ever wondered how to pronounce the name of this weird disease, if you cannot pronounce it, you will not remember it. So go on, say it out loud and explain. Explaining, again, in your own mind. So explaining concepts, thinking about what you might already know about that topic. This is really big when I hear that students are using Anki, or maybe you're using a lot of questions to study from. To avoid just rote memorizing things, you really want to make sure that you're elaborating. And so I'm really big on encouraging, I don't discredit Anki. There's definitely a lot of benefit in Anki, and it automates some of these strategies for you, but I do really ask students to try to think a little bit more deeply about the cards as they're going through them. And so some questions you might ask yourself is, like as you're going through your cards or as you're going through multiple choice questions, what else do you know about that topic? So think about, like, how does this relate to what I learned yesterday or last week, or maybe predict how it might relate to other things that you might be studying later in that week. Think about why the professor or the faculty or the question bank, if you're using questions, have touched upon that topic. Why is it important? Have you ever seen an example of that topic, maybe in class or in a clinical setting? If you're doing questions, you always want to be thinking, what can I change in this question stem to make the correct answer incorrect, or all the other incorrect answers correct? This sort of forces you to think a little bit deeper about that content. Anything you wanted to add, Dr. Schlegel, on this one?
I'm just looking here in the chat function, and it seems like a lot of people like that. And the other thing is also, if you don't have a word for something, it doesn't exist. It doesn't exist in your mind. And this is pretty universal here. So we have a lot of people here from Europe. We have people really across the globe, which is such an honor. And that really works in every culture. If there is no word, it's really, you cannot grasp it. Now, as a fellow microbiologist, I have to say, especially with microbes, you really gotta know how to pronounce this with the species and subspecies, because otherwise it is really a problem when you need to apply them, need to apply the antibiotics and so forth. So you gotta need the words down. This is really a very important thing. So some people here have roommates, right? And maybe there is an issue about the talking, but here again, take a walk, take a stroll, talking to your smartphone, rerun a topic in your mind, speak it out loud. And you will find your spot. You will find what's comfortable for you and where you can do it, if it's for you. But try it out, give it a try, you'll see. And you know what, your roommate might actually learn. This might be a very good thing. All right.
Yep, another really quick idea for elaboration is concept maps. So some of you mentioned that you were using concept maps in the beginning of this talk, and that's exactly what elaboration is. I mean, you've got the central topic and then you're sort of expanding on it. And so that's another way to use elaboration.
Awesome. And a lot of participants here really getting creative, which is great. This is exactly what it's supposed to be, because guess what? You will have to learn wherever you go from here. You will never be just at the medical school. You will always be everywhere, in the ward and anywhere else, and you've got to really come up with these methods.
Okay. Next one.
Yep. There we go.
Okay, so space practice. This is a big one. So you all probably have crammed at one point or another in your life, and cramming does work in the short term, but really you're not going to be able to retain information long term if you're cramming. And in medical school, you need to remember this stuff forever. So it's really important that you space out your practice, space out your studying. 5 hours spent crammed versus 5 hours spent spaced out over 2 weeks. Spaced out is so much better. So ideally, when you are studying something, you're presented with this information, whether it's in class, whether it's in your pre-reading, whatever, you're presented with this information. And then ideally, you really want to review that information again within 24 hours. And then again in a couple days, and then again in maybe a week. And then again in maybe a month. So every time you review this information, you can get away with maybe spacing it a little bit more and more. But the idea is you're really sort of spacing out your exposure to this content rather than cramming it all together. There's been a lot of studies that suggest that this is true. I mean, it works. The oldest researcher in this, his name is Ebbinghaus, and he is from like the 1800s. So this has been around for a long time, and it's been replicated time and time again. So it's definitely something that you should try to incorporate. And Anki, the flashcard app Anki, A-N-K-I, does this for you. So it will keep track. It has a built-in algorithm which will keep track of whether or not you know something or you don't. And if you don't know it, it's showing it to you a little bit more frequently. And if you know it, then maybe it doesn't show it to you for a while, but it continues to space out the learning automatically, which is really, really nice. In our school, it's built into the curriculum as well. So we have a spiral curriculum. So that means like certain topics are coming back up over and over and over throughout the curriculum. They sort of pop up in different at different times, and it's really to the students' benefit because they're getting these additional exposures to this content.
And just for the interest of time, I'm going to move on, but I would encourage everybody who's talking about test taking skills or specific needs, we give you our email at the end, and take a note of that. I will write in the chat box also throughout the talk, I guess. Make a note of that, so if you want to follow up with us, please do. All right.
Okay, the next one is called interleaving. And so interleaving is really where you're sort of mixing up the topics that you're studying. You might alternate between various topics. The examples given here are maybe easy versus hard, maybe something you know well. Maybe you're doing like a a spaced repetition on something from last week for a little while, but then you're mixing it with something from this week. And so you're really trying to sort of interleave the topics to see how they all fit together. Because if you learn everything just in isolation, that's not really helpful. Like, you really want to be able to see the big picture of how it all fits. I don't know, Dr. Schlegel, do you have anything to add on this one?
Yeah, so that's actually a very interesting question. So if there is not a spiral curriculum, so how do we make note of stuff? Well, if you take notes and if you follow along what you're studying, there is a pretty good chance that you will take notes and you will have one coherent booklet. I mean, I'm using loose leaves, obviously, right? But there are these spiral bound notebooks and whatnot. Use these notebooks because they really create a booklet of your journey, of your time as you're learning, whatever the content is. And then you can follow along. And then you use one of these nice little markers that you just tag on them and glue on them. And then you know, oh, okay, every piece here and here and here, this is microbiology, and every other piece here and here, this is physiology. So you can literally open the page, whatever your last physiology was, and read up on that. And then would go a little bit back where your marker is in with the microbiology. So in other words, you create this mixing up yourself. So you don't have to kind of go along with a curriculum that's just differently structured. Just build a structure on your own. And the thing is really, the more you play with this, the more fun it becomes and the more you learn about it, because it's both. You really have fun as you're doing it. And I'm usually adding, by the way, a lot of color when I'm learning up on things because I have to be really fast. And that helps me. And color coding, if that works for you, it's a great aid.
I might also, I like that you cited Make It Stick here. That is, for those of you that have questions about these strategies, that is a great book, very practical. And so if you are a student, I would highly recommend getting your hands on that book. It's just a great book. It's all based on scientific evidence, what works best when you're studying. And so highly recommend that book. Also, as far as a way to be efficient when you're interleaving, I really encourage my students to, as they're studying throughout the week, so Monday they come home, they're studying what took place that night, as they're creating their notes or reviewing their notes from that day, I encourage students to use the stoplight technique. So that's simply tagging things red, yellow, or green. So red means green means you've got it, you're good, you totally understand it. Yellow, it's kind of iffy. Red, either you didn't have time to cover it or it's something that's still really tricky for you. And so if you're doing this all along every night, on Saturday when you do a big review of that week's material, you know that you're starting with the reds, because those are the things either you didn't have time to get to or the things that are still very tricky for you. And odds are the reds are going to be from different sessions all week long, so it sort of naturally will lead to interleaving in that way. So you're sort of mixing up your topics.
Super. Thank you very much for pointing that out.
Okay, the next one is retrieval practice, and this is huge. Definitely you want to be testing yourself as much as possible. There are lots and lots of studies that have demonstrated the usefulness of retrieval practice. And so I mentioned a few minutes ago, we spend a lot of time getting information in, but many of us don't spend enough time practicing getting it back out. And that's a really important piece when we're learning material. You know, that's why doing practice questions are really, really important. And that's the main thing you think about when you're thinking about retrieval practice, that there are lots of other ways to demonstrate retrieval practice, some of which are teaching other people, talking to yourself, group work. You could be whiteboarding, like drawing out pathways, anything you're doing from memory, and then you're checking it against your notes or whatever your resources that you're using to make sure that you got it correct. When my students are preparing for their step 1 exam, we really encourage them, which, you know, is like the biggest exam they're probably going to take. I work with them to teach them how to use a question-based study method. And so really we're using multiple choice questions as their primary way to study, and then they're filling their gaps with other resources as they discover that they have weaknesses based on the questions. But the questions are so useful because you're really thinking about this, what some people might consider abstract material, but you're thinking about it in a very concrete way, because you're doing a question on it. So you're applying it to like a clinical scenario. And so it sticks a lot better and helps you reinforce your learning.
the other thing was, this also reminds me of, so once you're in the practice, so wherever you go as a professional is, you will always have to be in a situation where you will quickly call up a colleague and ask for a certain piece of information, or just get a confirmation on a way of thinking that you have. So in a way, a lot of learning techniques are really an entry level into a way how to act in your career and how to exchange information and get confirmation throughout your career. And physicians do this a lot, that they say, I have this finding, my working hypothesis is this, what do you think about that? Okay, let's do this. So this is not just something that sits here in medical school and never ever. It is really an entryway into the profession, whatever the profession is, I might say. So it can be definitely be more than only medicine.
Yeah.
And going from here is, this is something that I really would like to recommend my own students a lot. So I'm pretty sure you had to study this insane biochemical pathways, and they were abstract. It didn't tell to you, it didn't talk to you in any ways, and they were just painful to study, and you had no idea what it was, just molecules flying around in a cycle. And this is when you really have the problem that you have a dry and abstract ideas that just has no face. And human memory is designed for stories, right? Human memory is designed for concrete information, for concrete examples out there. And what I usually ask my students to do is that I said, well, go online and find a case study. And there's really a myriad of case studies out there and examples out there for each and every disease on the planet. One of my favorite go-to journals is the New England Journal of Medicine, simply because it's really an authoritative text, but you can really go anywhere. I mean, go out to Google and check it out, but make sure if you learn about anything abstract, give it a face, give it a story, find a case, find a concrete example. It will really help you the best, and it helps you build memory. And this is what you need memory.
So I see some comments in the chat that these strategies take more time. That is true. You are going to be spending more time implementing these things, but the time that you're investing, it will give you a bigger reward. So it's definitely worth it to spend a little bit of extra time that it takes to implement these strategies, because the payout is going to be worth it.
It is, but I feel if you try to have fun with things, like the interleaving, for instance, right, where you take this today and then you take the other one today, and then I add another concept in, I think you make it good for yourself. And also you learn to kind of cross think, and versus think only in concepts or in topics. You don't want to do this, right? Because the human body is not a textbook. The human body is very integrated, and you need to find out how things work. So the more abstract you think, the more connective you think on your own, the better you make it on yourself. And the last example here that I want to bring is actually something that was brought up here in the chat, where you said, well, add images to it, make it alive. And this is exactly what this here. We're talking about dual coding, and it's really fun. So this is actually, it's an older theory by Alan Pavio. His idea was combining verbal and non-verbal information. What simply is, well, connecting an image with a word. So if you are doodling when you're note-taking, and I'm a very non-gifted doodler, but I'm masterful, you know, I've come up with kind of silly little notes and silly little images, it really helps. Or we have students that don't go to the textbook, that go straight to videos. And sure, they have to make sure that they get a video that's really scientifically and that's really appropriate, but they learn with images. And if you understand yourself and if you know about yourself, this is the way you function best. By all means, do it.
Yeah.
Now,
oh,
go ahead.
I was going to say, going back to those intelligences that you showed in the beginning, just because maybe you think that you're not a visual, you don't have a preference for visual, or maybe you don't have a preference for auditory, it's really just a preference. And so really you should try to force yourself to use different ways to demonstrate your knowledge. So the more that you can combine, the better. This is the easiest way is by writing and drawing together. But you know, so I've had some students like think about a movie in their mind as they're reading, or whatever you can do to combine more than one learning intelligence, the better.
This is actually true. So we in the medical school, sure, we give students textbooks, online textbooks to study as a basic base of knowledge. And I would say that's still important, because generations of medical students studied with this really renowned authoritative text, especially in pathology with Robbins. And you can't ignore this amount, this huge amount of knowledge and work that has built up. However, if you use one and you add the images in, or you use the book to really make sure that whatever imagery you're looking for is appropriate and scientifically sound, then you're good. So a lot of students really use both. And if that works for you, by all means, go for it. I think it's very important. Once you know how you work, stick with it. That's really important. Great. Awesome. So this was a big lift, everybody. So now what I would like to ask the audience, which of these choices could work for you best? Woo, okay. This is fun. This works so well. Can anyone from the non-American countries maybe write me in the chat if they could get their quiz in? I would love to know if that works international. That would really be such a thrill.
Yes, they're saying it works.
Canada works. Oh, that's awesome. From the Caribbean, it's a little slow. I know that I tried it one time with some kids.
I'm seeing a lot of elaboration.
Yeah, yeah.
Even elaboration is so easy and you can use it all the time, especially when students are reading like a really dense text and they're just, you start and you're super focused, and then after time you're fading. You don't even realize it's happening, and then 2 hours go by and you look back and you're like, what did I just read? I don't remember anything. You can use elaboration throughout your reading. So every like couple pages, just pause, look away, explain it to yourself in your own words, come back, continue reading. It's something that's just a very practical.
Yeah, it's true. I mean, another thing is all of you, and I promise this to you, all of you will be going to give a talk somewhere in your life. And at the latest at that moment, you will have to practice it by speaking it loud, and you will have to tell your roommate or your loved one, or you have to get in front of a mirror or whatever works for you. But it is not a bad idea to train these things, because you might need them in different environments, or you might counsel somebody how to give a talk or how to study. So this is really a gift that's meant to be given forward, right? So these might all be things that you will train somebody else possibly. But it's so true, elaboration, it's the easiest thing to do. Reading loud a book, right? So you hear yourself, also experiencing your own voice, how it carries, how it works in an environment is very helpful. So that's another good thing. And retrieval practice, absolutely, yeah. Flashcards and whatnot, whatever works. Great, guys, thank you so much for working along with us here. That's really great. Okay, so there were some apprehensive additions in the chat about interpersonal studies, so how to join a group. However, there is really a harmonious way, no matter where you are on the scale of introversion, extroversion, it doesn't really matter. It can work for you if done the right way. So let's join a group, shall we? First, why? Why would we join a group? Well, for once, there is a very high chance wherever you were in a session and lecture, you might not have caught everything. You might possibly have missed that one important concept. And if you are in a group, this all comes out because somebody else probably will have caught it, and then you help each other connecting the dots. It's really helpful, believe me. The other thing is, undoubtedly in a group you will have to talk and you will have to explain something. And this is where your weaknesses come out. Ouch, well, we don't want to have weaknesses, but that makes us humans. And you want to know your weaknesses because you want to uncover them and you want to get ready. So group work improves readiness. And you know what? It's not just you, it's everyone in that group. And you help each other. And if you guys don't help each other, it's not the group for you. You need a different group. It's as simple as that. However, mostly your groups are really working together, provide the details that you might have missed. And also there are so many creative ideas usually coming on that it really helps you critical thinking. So surround yourself with people that help you, with motivate you and inspire you. And it's really a great experience. And a lot of people just made lifelong friends from here. And just to let you guys know, the most important portion of our curriculum is a case-based portion where the students study and learn in groups. So the school is set up that way. But at the same time, there's a very respectful atmosphere that's very clear from the beginning about how we deal with the communication and how we we deal with interactions, and there is really a way to do this. And again, this is because in your future career environment, this is the way it's being run. So if you learn it here and you make your little mistakes here, that's great, because later on you know how you do it and you become a pro. So it's really a steep learning curve, and jump in and try it out. But this is really my personal gold standard, and you don't necessarily need to have a study group for that. But my point is here, whatever opportunity you might have to teach somebody else, by all means, go and do it. Teaching is a physician's core skill. That's from numerous scientific papers out there. It's true. And I would even say not just a physician, everybody's core skill is teaching somebody. You have a kid, you will teach your kid. You have a niece, you will teach your niece. You will have a neighbor, under whatever circumstances, you will teach your neighbor. It doesn't matter, you will teach somebody, and the earlier you do it, the better. Teaching others, also called peer teaching at the medical school, puts you in a unique leadership position. Now, in our medical school, we really encourage students and we incorporate students teaching other students, simply because it creates a very elaborative and a collaborative environment. As a student, you will rather ask another student what you think, a naive question, because a student is closer to you and you will feel safe to ask that question. At the same time, as a student explaining it to another student, you probably find way better way to explain it than a teacher could. Many times when I was kind of stumped how to explain a concept in microbiology, I said to somebody, well, could you explain it? And the student explained it to the students, and they did it way better than I could have thought about it. So by all means, if you get the opportunity to teach as a student, do it. It's awesome. It will reveal your knowledge gaps. Yes, be ready, but that's fine. Then you just say so and learn. That's part of the game. And it keeps you on your toes. And my biggest point is really, it's career training. So get into a group, get into peer teaching, teach people what you just learned, teach your roommate what you're just talking about to yourself. It really helps you and your roommate. So you both can really practice here a lot. Now, we're coming kind of to the end of the session, but I really felt I want to wrap this up with a little bit of ideas about the anatomy of a session and also about note taking. Now, Amber could probably talk an hour about this because it's really super important, and we have sessions with the students to explain that. But I just thought I'd let you know so it's easy on yourself once you go to the next session and take notes. So there are certain bits and pieces in every session that have to be there. There have to be learning objectives. That means the goals that a session has to cover. If you can, flesh them out prior to your session. And as you can, after a session, use these learning objectives as your quizzes, because the professor are supposed to cover these. Very important. Now also, notice that in a session, the content is usually provided in sections. Remember, I had sections. I first talked about the soloist learning, then we talked about the group learning. Now I'm telling you about a session, right? So there are little sections here. Make a note of that when you take notes. It helps you a lot. Then when there is an activity, such like the polling, right? Make a note of that too. A lot of people here said elaboration. Well, what might this tell you when maybe you give a talk like this to other people? A lot of people have that in their environment, that they can talk to themselves, to other people. So elaboration might be very important. Then summary. Well, similar to the learning objectives, usually this is a one set slide, and we have a summary slide with added information, what the instructor deems is very important. So make a note of that, because this is sometimes also where exam questions come from. This is the way it is. I mean, usually exam questions are related to the learning objectives, but the summary might add important points in. And then last but not least, instructor's contact. Always make a note. If you're in a medical school, come to an office hour, introduce yourselves. Let us know you're there and you're good, or you're not good and you need help. That's great. Your instructor, your professor might become your next peer, your next colleague, your next referee, and your next mentor. So make a note of the people you meet on this journey. It is very helpful, and it's just fantastic.
I might just add one thing about that last slide. So really learning objectives are a gift from your faculty. You should definitely use those because those are really the key parts that the faculty are hoping that you walk away with. And so if you can, depending on where you're at, maybe some of the faculty and professors release these early before the session. whatever you can do to get your hands on sort of an idea of how the session is going to go beforehand so that you can frame your learning. I sort of think about it like you're going on this road trip. Would you just hop in the car and start driving? No, you'd probably first like Google Maps, look at where you're going, get an idea of how long it's going to take you, figure out, you know, if you're going to need to stop along the way, and sort of get an idea of where you're headed, right? Same thing with learning objectives. If you can look at those learning objectives before going into the session, just so you have an idea of where that session is going to lead, so that you can frame your learning before just jumping in blind and being expected to like take in all this content and not really have a filing system already thought about in your mind. That can be useful.
Yeah, that's a very good point. And also I feel it takes a lot of stress away from you. So we have at the medical school what we call a flipped classroom design for sessions. That means we give the students the learning objectives prior to class, and they're expected to flesh them out with also some study material that they get and come to class prepared. So this is obviously built into our system, but I think it's generally best practice because undoubtedly there will be something in a session that you just miss because it moves so fast. But then you have your structure. You know that there are the learning objectives, and if you missed one thing out of 5, great. You can concentrate on this one thing and build up the knowledge, and you know where you're heading. So as Amber just said, I totally agree with this. Yeah, make a note, make a road trip ready, you know, get your bearings ready before you start.
And that way when the professor leads you to these high points, the LOs, you're like, ah, oh, that's an LO, this is important. Let me make sure I'm paying attention to this part.
Yeah. The professor might like it when you say, well, there was this one learning objective I want to ask you. Right. Wow, you look good. All right. And last, again, Amber can really give a whole deep session about this. If you take notes, put all this already onto your notes pad when you get ready for the class. There are certain sections, right? The learning objective, the summary, the activities. So build it into your note-taking. And by all means, find and protect your own method. If you like to do longhand, I like to do longhand, do it. If you like to tape, then tape. It doesn't matter. Do what works best for you. It's really important. I use colors. That's why I added them in, which is a little stressful sometimes during a session to handle the green and the blue and the red. But usually, when I went over my notes after that session, there was a word that stood up in red because I missed something about it, and it really helped me. So experiment with what works best for you. And then after a session, immediately review and fill in the gaps with whatever you might have missed. And then there's the whole thing of study products. Don't just let it sit, work with it. Make a compilation, write a summary, draw it out as a schematics. There's beautiful things you can do. Work with it, draw a model, concept maps, we already heard in the chat, so a lot of things. So the way you teach each other here in the chat is fantastic, so keep going. This is all the things you can do. But lo and behold, this was my last slide. And I really hope that I challenged each and every one of you guys to change your story and to maybe experiment with things and to learn from each other. And I believe you can actually save the chat. I don't know if all panelists see the 3 dots. You should be able to save it for all the different little things that you guys said, because it's really very useful. And our email address comes at the very end. But before we get there, I have some questions to ask. So, what strategy inspired you for trying it out? And having said that, something that you hadn't done yet? Ooh, spaced review. I'm so glad. Yep. Some professors actually do that. Dual encoding. Yep. Using the whiteboard. Actually, we have rooms that are designed for drawing on the walls. Can you imagine how cool
our
it is?
students sit in rooms that are completely covered in wallpaper that is whiteboard. So
yeah.
You walk into the rooms and they're just all covered in drawing.
And I really wanna motivate to maybe think about that and get a whiteboard, you know, and draw on things. The stoplight strategy, there you go, studying in groups. All right. And find your own way, find what works. And
I'm so happy you guys like the stoplight. Good.
Yeah, I think so. But I also want to say, be kind to yourself. If there is something that doesn't work, well, then try something else. And also maybe you want to try these methods out with something that's not high stakes. So maybe, I don't know, the shopping list, right? Maybe you try to memorize it and play around with it, right? Or maybe the way certain things are in an aisle when you go to some store, I don't know. Play with it first. But my feeling is really you have a really good idea about what might work. Oh yeah, walk and talk it out with yourself. Absolutely, absolutely. Besides, it's healthy, right? Some people do it on the treadmill. Well, yeah.
So we're getting a few questions. Do we have time? Do we have time for questions?
I would say we have one. Let me go to the next question slide because I would like to ask about the key takeaways, guys. Very brief, and then maybe we go to the questions. Or Amber, should we cut the key takeaways and?
No.
Hello, hello, animal. Try new things. Woohoo! Absolutely, try new things every day. Group work. I'm so thrilled that you really catch on to the group work, and oh, this is awesome. My God, this is wonderful. Yes, there's no one right way to study. This is lovely.
Right, back to the self-directed learning. I mean, really figure out what works for you. And so the key is using these, thinking about the way that you're thinking, which sounds so deep, but really it's simple. You do it all the time, but paying attention to that. And really forcing yourself to do that reflection piece and incorporate whatever you learn into your next plan.
Amber, why don't you look at the chat box now while still questions are coming in? I think this is
Sure.
great.
I saw a few questions about study groups and whether or not you should form a study group that's different from your social group.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not sure there's like a hard and fast answer to this, but I would lean on the fence. I would lean on the side of, yeah, you probably should have a distinction between the two, because something that I see in study groups is that students waste time chit-chatting, gossiping, you know, just like catching up. And really you want your study group to be efficient. And so if you're able to do that with your social group, that's great, but a lot of people can't. And so it might be helpful to form a group that that isn't your social group. Also, study groups work best when they're diverse, right? And so you really want to have people from different backgrounds, different strengths and weaknesses, so that you can all collaborate together. That way everyone can bring something to the table. And if your social group is most like you, then I would really encourage you to look for a more diverse study group.
There's a lot of questions here about the timing. So I would say try things out, start with shorter periods and then expand on them a little bit. You could set yourself a clock, an alarm that kind of cuts you off. So for me, I don't know, I found out I can learn really well in cycles for 90 minutes, but that's me. If you're shorter, then set a clock and see, maybe you can expand it a little bit. It also will depend what it is.
Right. Yeah, there's something called the Pomodoro technique, which if you just Google it, there's a lot out there. There's apps you can get for your phone, but it's basically working in small, really focused chunks of time. And if you have a problem with maintaining focus for a long time, or even just motivation, you might want to try it out. So basically it's you promise yourself, I'm going to work and ignore all distractions for these 20 minutes, and you set an alarm, and then when that alarm goes off, you give yourself a 5-minute break, which is like a little reward. And then you do it again, and then after 4 times, they call these Pomodoros, after 4 Pomodoros, then you give yourself a bigger reward, which is maybe like you get to watch a Netflix show, or you get to go for a walk and get coffee, or whatever you like, for 30 minutes. And then you come back and you do it again. And it seems counterintuitive because you're taking all these breaks, but some people do work better this way because you're super hyper focused for these small chunks of time, and then you're tending to your distractions in these 5-minute breaks. And so you could try that. It does work for some people. Yeah, someone's recommending something called Focus Keeper. The icon looks like a tomato. There's lots of different apps you can get to install it on your phone or your iPad or your computer. And a lot of students do find that it works for them.
I posted both your emails in the Facebook group we have that has all of them in it, so they'll have access to it.
Perfect. Are we out of time?
It is 12 now.
Okay.
All right.
But thank you both so much for talking and joining us today.
Best wishes for everyone in your journey.
Best wishes for everyone. You got our emails. Write us your emails, and then we can discuss it and get you the best answer ever. So it was such an honor. Thank you guys so much. That was really fun.
Bye.
Have a great day, everybody.
Have a good day. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.